Hello, and welcome to The Poison Pen. I'm John Charles, and we are delighted to have with us today two authors, Jennifer Dornbush and Noelle Ilhi. Did I get that right?
You did. Thank
Okay,
you.
good. Both authors are here for their, newest book, but we'll kind of stretch that in Noelle's case, since it's had a life before. For those of you that are new to the bookstore, we do over 200 events in person and virtually. The best way to find out which authors, like Noelle and Jennifer, are coming is to sign up for, I'm really quiet, so I'll try the best I can, but I worked in libraries for 30 years, so they kind of drum talking loudly out of you when you work there. Is to sign up for our e-news, and you can do that after the program. Just stop by the desk. You'll find out which authors are coming to the Poison Pen. We'll have a conversation with both authors. We'll have some time for questions from you. Afterwards, both authors will be happy to sign books for you. Now, please join me in welcoming Jennifer and Noelle. My first question for both of you, and we'll start with you, Noelle, is who was Noelle before you became a published author?
That's a deep question. I was an editor in a previous life, so I was helping other people bring their books into the world, and I really liked being behind the scenes. I didn't think I would write books myself, but there were books that I wanted to read that weren't out there, so I ended up stepping into that role eventually. But yeah, editing and working for a small publishing house before that.
Jennifer?
Okay, before all of this, I actually did some freelance journalism for a while and worked in public relations and marketing, and then I taught high school and college, and then I worked in LA for a while. But yeah, and I did screenwriting for a while. So yeah, it's been a long road to get here, but a lot of fun experiences along the way.
When did you decide you wanted to become a published author, and what was that like, getting your first book published? We'll start with you, Jennifer.
I knew when I was 8 years old that I wanted to be an author, a writer. I had no idea how to, of course, at 8, what that looked like or how to go about that. But my actual first published anything was like where you actually got a paycheck, and it was $25 for an article that I wrote for my hometown newspaper. And ironically, it had a theme of death. So, but yeah, that was my first taste of publishing. So, I was 19.
Noelle, what was it like transitioning from editor to author?
It was a really cool experience. It felt like the thing I was always supposed to do, but hadn't quite hit me in the head yet. So it was this time of year, and I had this experience at one of those Halloween carnivals, and I was standing there and watching this really bored-looking security guard while people were screaming, and this guy was running around with like a chainsaw, and I kept thinking, like, what if that guy isn't the real chainsaw guy tonight? What if it's somebody else? Or, like, what if one of those screams is kind of real? And it's like, someone should write a book about this. And I was like, maybe I should. I'd, like I said, been in the background for so long, but I decided it was time to step into the writing side of things on my own. And the rest was kind of history after that.
What can you tell us about your new book, or the new book that brought you here? In your case, Noelle, it had a life before.
It did have a life before. Ask for Andrea came out several years ago, and I've actually been re-listening to it because I hadn't read it since then. So I just finished it today. And that book, I was in the middle of writing another book when the idea hit me, and it kind of launched out into the world, and then a few book talkers got a hold of it and some incredible bookstagrammers, and it was this unexpected whirlwind that really brought that book up to the top of the charts, and it was so just incredible and unexpected, and I'm so grateful to those readers that kind of gave that book a second life. And I've since partnered with some publishers, Kensington, because I had originally published it independently, and that's been an incredible, lovely whirlwind as well.
And it's basically about a serial killer, but told from 3 victims' perspective.
It is, yes. I generally don't like reading books about ghosts, which is ironic. This book has 3 ghosts in it, but if you've ever read The Lovely Bones, they're not very ghosty. They are just 3 women. It's loosely inspired by 3 of Ted Bundy's victims, and I just really wanted to hear their stories. I was tired of hearing about Ted. So I felt like I wanted to really give them some voices back. So that's where the spark for that book came from.
What can you tell us about your latest book, Jennifer?
Okay, yeah, What Darkness Does is book 5 in my Coroner's Daughter series. And so we're still journeying with Dr. Emily Hartford, and she's embarking on a pretty dark case. No spoiler there with the title. But it was actually, when I sat down to try, I was like, okay, I got book 5. I got to come up with an idea. I got to come up with a case. I knew what I wanted to do with Emily's journey personally, but it's always about finding that right case to connect with that. And I started researching crimes in Newaygo County, Michigan, where I'm from. And this a particular true crime came up, and I had never heard of it, which shocked me because it's pretty crazy crime and murder. And I was like, oh, that's the one. So this is actually the first book in the series that's inspired by a true crime that happened. And yeah.
It actually prompted a Supreme Court case, didn't it?
It did. So the murderer, who I'm going to call him a serial murderer because there were at least 5 victims that we know of. He was only tried for 1 because only 1 body was found, the woman, a young woman's body. But when the body was found, it was proven that he had murdered her on national forest land. So inside of Newaygo County is the Manistee National Forest, and because he had murdered her on national federal land, the case went to federal court in Grand Rapids, and so it was tried federally. And Michigan is a non-death penalty state and has been since like the late 1800s, but again, because it was a federal case, he was given the death sentence because federally that was possible. But then there's a follow-up set. So he was put in prison and given the death sentence. But then at the end of former President Biden's presidency, he commuted 37 federal prisoners who were on death row, and this was one of them. So now he is serving a life sentence, but not on death row.
When it comes to your protagonist, Emily, you pretty much were destined to write about her from a young age.
I guess so. He's leading me. Yeah, Emily is a small town coroner who took over her father's medical examiner post and is now, working to continue his legacy as a crime fighter. And I would say it's inspired by my own journey as a daughter of a medical examiner who lived in a small town, and who the office for medical examiner was in our house, so we got a very first-hand look of what death investigation looks like, for better or worse.
One of the things I really admire about Ask for Andrea is the inspiration behind it, and that comes from a campaign.
It does. So despite the book being called Ask for Andrea, there's nobody named Andrea in the book. Ask for Andrea is a code phrase, and it's inspired by a real campaign in the United Kingdom called Ask for Angela, and that will be displayed in restrooms or restaurants. It says if you're on a date and you don't feel safe, just ask for Angela at the bar, and we'll get you home. We'll call the police if needed. So that really inspired me. I loved that small way that maybe a stranger could be your last lifeline if you needed help. There's a campaign in the U.S. called, you could order an angel shot, but I love that personalization, that it was a person. So in my book, it's Ask for Andrea, and that's a code phrase that you see throughout the book that some of the women see as they are in these situations.
Well, it's scary because you gave a statistic somewhere that I hadn't really thought about, but 1 in 3 women are assaulted.
Yeah, the statistic is really flabbergasting when you think about it, and that's over the course of a lifetime. But that's part of the reason that I write books, and a lot of us thriller authors write books the way that we do, that are inspired by real events or just the real things we know might happen to us, especially as women. Like, there's a lot of really good people in the world, but there's also a lot of creeps, and there's a lot of bad things that can happen no matter who you are or where you are. So that reality, I think, is something that draws a lot of us to true crime and draws a lot of us to thrillers. It's not because we're creepy, it's because we see ourselves in the shoes of the characters.
I think a lot of readers often believe that when you write novels, you can make everything up, but you do have to have some facts, some grounding. What kinds of research was involved in your latest book? And we'll start with you, Jennifer.
Yeah, I love research, and I do a lot of research. And this book, again, because I started with research for the case, as soon as I latched onto this case, I immediately wanted to find the court transcriptions and the police records. And so I phoned a friend and got a hold of all of that stuff. And then, fortunately, because it did happen in my county, I'm very good friends with the editor of our hometown newspaper, who gave me that first job, by the way. And he presented me with this stack of articles that his paper and their reporters had covered over the course of 3 or 4 years of this entire case. I mean, that was such a blessing because I had all this crazy information. He also gave me letters that this murderer had written to him personally that were just crazy. So it was a lot of research, but then at the end of the day, you're right. You take what you need, and then the rest, you're like, you have to tuck it, you have to put it away. Got to make an entertainment.
Noelle, any research?
Yeah, lots of research, and before I know exactly which book I'm going to write, I'm just filling my head constantly with, my favorite murder podcast or true crime documentaries, just listening to the things and watching the things that give me anxiety and make it hard to sleep at night. But when I find a particular case that really connects with me emotionally and just I can't stop telling people to listen to that episode or telling my husband the details because he doesn't usually listen to them, then I know that something has really struck a nerve, and I will start researching everything I can about that case, and seeing if I think a lot of the cases I like happened pre-internet, so they're not as well known. And I will often modernize them in my books. And, I tend to fictionalize a lot, but the heart of some of those big emotions or the bravery or just some of the aspects of that story that really struck a nerve with me do tend to be there underpinning the book.
You mentioned before the fascination with true crime, especially over the last decade, whether we're reading it or watching it. Why do you think people, especially now, are so fascinated by true crime? I'll open it up to both of you.
Take it away.
I think that people have always been fascinated with true crime, to be quite honest, but I think our access to it has increased. But being a literature major, I had studied this stuff like way back into the 18 and 17 and 1600s. Like, people were always fascinated. Some of the earliest books are crime books, and even our earliest television shows, back in the 50s, are detective shows and crime. So I think we've always been fascinated with it. But I do think access, being, the incredible amount of digital internet access we have to all of this, and people digging up old things and making content out of them is, it's just feeding and feeding.
I think Jennifer's exactly right. And I also think that with things like, the internet and podcasts, that we have the ability to find voices that we trust to tell us those stories too. There's some podcasts I don't enjoy listening to as much because I don't feel like they treat survivors or victims' stories quite as tenderly as I would like to see them treated. So yeah, I think that we can kind of rally around the stories that give us information and help us understand what happened, while respecting those stories too.
I think you mentioned it a little bit before, Noelle, but it's important to emphasize it. In Ask for Andrea, you wrote it because you wanted to put the victims front and center and stop glamorizing. I remember Ted Bundy. People would always talk about how handsome he was, how charming, how, that you could be right next to him and he would be the perfect date. But that's not what we need. He's a bad person. He shouldn't be idolized.
Absolutely. I watched a documentary before I started writing that book, and it was about Ted Bundy's victims, and it told their stories in a way I hadn't heard before, and it was so refreshing because it was not focused on Ted front and center. Like, yes, he's scary, yes, he's an awful person, but I was so captivated by his victim stories. Like, they were the ones that were fascinating. They had brushed paths with a serial killer. Some had escaped, some hadn't. And I wanted so badly to hear the stories I couldn't hear anymore. I just, that was the whole reason I started writing this book, because I needed a way to try my best to put their voices into words.
Both of you write books that are quite dark and quite intense, but you do give readers something I appreciate, which is hope. And you both actually kind of had some great quotes, so let's make sure I get them right. Noelle, you said, it's important, a powerful reminder that even the darkest places, in those awful seconds when your gut says something's not right, that there are people watching out for each other. There's a sliver of hope at the heart of Ask for Andrea. And Jennifer, you said darkness without redemption is pure evil. Darkness is never the end of the story. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of not completely denying hope?
I think because I did honestly grow up around a lot of darkness, and it didn't make us dark. It didn't make our family dark, and I think my parents worked hard at that. My personal mission, I guess, is to show that there's always hope and light, even in the darkest recess of the human experience. And one of the things that struck me about this case was the victim, like you were saying, because she was young, she was a young mother, and her voice had really been silenced, because the reason she got killed is because she was, in the real life and in the book, is because she was going to soon testify against her rapist. But the rapist had gotten out of prison. He had been gotten out of prison on bond. And nobody was listening to her, saying, he's going to kill me. I don't have a good feeling about this. Nobody took her seriously. And so the actual story is a lot darker than the one I wrote, because I do believe that, but I do think that it's important to, and maybe I think more women's voices are coming out than they have been before, and I think that's important to say, here's a girl who, really a girl, 19, with a baby, who was trying to tell the world around her, something's wrong, I'm in trouble, and she was. They both were. And so that is obviously a very dark thing, but I think I like to focus on the hope of there is hope of, like, we are, by doing this, offering people a voice and awakening people to, like, see something, say something. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be the way it was. So
I love that. I have a friend who's an anthropology professor, and she loves to talk about the importance of pragmatism in navigating the world. She talks about how, a certain brand of optimism can kind of be a head in the sand, like nothing bad could ever happen to me, nothing really bad could ever happen out there. And then pessimism on the other end of the spectrum is like, what's the point? Like, everything is terrible, so why try? But you've got pragmatism that says, okay, I acknowledge that there are some really bad things, and then you also have that hope that says there is a lot of beauty in the world, and there's a lot of good people who are trying and that want to help and that want to rally together and be there for even a stranger if they need help. So I think about that a lot when I write my books, that that balance. We've got the darkness, but we've also got hope and we've got the light, and I think focusing on both of them is what really gets us through.
That's great. My next question is for you, Jennifer, because you say no one ever asks you this question, and it's, how does faith play a role in your writing?
Yeah, how does faith play a role in my writing? I mean, it's integral to who I am and have been for a very long time, and it's very integral into my mission statement, which I believe that there is no, I've got to say this correctly, but there's no evil so bad that God cannot overcome it with a greater good. And and that's where I want to live, and I truly believe that. And so even though I might dive into some dark places, and Noelle as well, I don't believe that's where we are left. And so it's integral into how I write. So
Is there a lot of praying done when you're on deadline?
there's a lot of praying all the time. The world stresses us out.
Let's talk a little bit about the writing process, because it's different for every author. Also, in your case, Jennifer, you're writing a series. Noelle, you write standalones, though you do have a prequel, I think, coming to this book. How do you approach each writing project? Is it the same? Do you know exactly where you're going? Do you just sit down and hope that somehow it knits itself all together? Let's start with you, Noelle.
One of my writing friends sent me this chart that shows where you are on the plotting to the flying by the seat of your pants. And I am apparently a true plantser, which is a combo of the two. So I tend to take in a lot of inspiration around listening to stories, listening to podcasts. And then when I do find a project, I take 40 pages of notes, just writing everything I can, and scenes that I want to include in the book that just kind of come to me as I think about the characters and who the different protagonists that I have, if it's multiple POVs, and who the villain is. And I write all of that down, and then I put it away, and I just write. So I don't ever go back to that document again. I always mean to, but I have written 8 books so far, and they are all standalones, including the prequel that's coming out for Ask for Andrea, that'll be out on November 4th. It's a standalone too, even though it's very closely tied to that book. It's about who Andrea was. This book has an Andrea in it. So I put it all in my brain, and then I just write through the headlights where I see the scenes as they come, and kind of see it like a movie in my head.
Jennifer?
Wow, my process is actually very similar, because I'll do a lot of pre-work, and I like to outline and research and all that. But then, and I'll have documents of things and notebooks, and then as soon as I start to write, it's in the back burner somewhere, and just go, because I like that journey of faith. I like that journey of mystery when you're sitting down to a blank page, and you know what that chapter is generally supposed to be about, but then you also get this that's the fun part of writing, this element of what is going to actually happen today. Not all days are great,
But does having a series character complicate things? Because you may have written something in book 1 that now you have to figure out, how do I make that work in book 5?
It does. I think, because this is the first series I've written, so I'm finding that I'm making a big document of, it's a very messy. I'm sure there's people with Excel skills who could do a lot better. But what color was his eyes, and what car was she driving, and how old were they in book 3? And that stuff drives me nuts. Yep.
Noelle, when you were writing Ask for Andrea, it's told from the 3 main characters' viewpoints. Was one of them more challenging to write? Was one easier? Did you identify with a particular character? Or were they all difficult in their own way?
Great question. I think they were all difficult in their own way, because they needed to be individuals, and all of them had a different experience, with realizing they were dead and trying to negotiate what they were going to do with that fact. But I think probably it was Brisha who follows the serial killer around. She jumps into his car and tries to see if my ghosts aren't very ghostly. They're just people for the most part. They can't walk through walls. They don't have GPS. So she decides to follow the killer and see if there's any way she can influence whatever he's about to do next, because he's finding women on dating sites and targeting them that way for the most part. So she manages to shut down his computer a few times, but she finds that she is just not that powerful, and it ends up really draining her to just watch him. She gets really attached to his family. But as I was thinking about what it would be like to be around someone that you knew had done something so awful to you personally and was going to do it to somebody else, that would just be really horrible. And I kind of started to dread writing those parts where she was watching him and interacting with him, because I could just imagine that it would be really terrible. So probably her.
In addition to writing the books, you kind of have to understand getting them out in the hands of readers. And Noelle, you've done that from an indie perspective, and now you're traditional, so you're hybrid, I guess is what they call it. What is that like? Are there advantages to going with a traditional publisher? Do you miss kind of being in control?
Yeah, I am in kind of a interesting situation with publishing. I retain my ebook rights, so I still am indie published when it comes to my ebooks, and then Kensington has my paperback rights for a few of my books in the US and Canada. Macmillan has the rights in UK and Australia. Simon & Schuster has the rights to my audiobooks. So it ends up being really cool to be able to collaborate with all these incredible, powerful, smart people, but it does create some logistical challenges when they want to have a different publication day than somebody else, or when, there's a lot of people that are trying to figure out promotions, or just it ends up that I need a little bit of a spreadsheet to be like, okay, I've gotten files here, I've gotten files there, I've communicated here, here, and here. So it ends up being a little bit of a circus and a whirlwind, but it's also great to be able to work with so many cool people and also still be able to advocate for my books and be really involved in the process, because I've learned over the years that I am a good advocate for my books, and it's really cool to still be very involved in the process with those amazing publishers.
My next question is, publishers, especially today, are fascinated by what they call an author's brand. How would you, to someone who's never read your books, describe yourself, your writing style, your brand? We'll start with you, Noelle, because I think at one point I read something about survivalist suspense.
Yeah, I call most of my books survival thrillers. They tend to be ordinary people that are suddenly in some situation they had no idea they were about to step into, or they're suddenly fighting for their lives on a normal Tuesday. That is how I imagine, things when I listen to a lot of true crime. It tends to be a lot of ordinary people, and that really fascinates me. So, yep, a lot of female protagonists, survival thrillers. A lot of my books take place in Idaho and Utah and Colorado, because those are the places that I know the best, and they don't get a lot of representation in thrillers. So, yeah.
Jennifer?
Oh, goodness. How would I describe it? Probably, forensic medical mystery thriller, I guess, is where, because there obviously I do lean a lot on the forensic side of my background, and female protagonists also. I also say kind of like Northern Noir, because I write a lot about Michigan, where I grew up and lived for a long time, and I think that's also an underrepresented, but it's also a really spooky place sometimes, the woods and the, so that's how I would describe, yeah.
Speaking of forensics, you actually wrote a handbook for other writers.
Yes, Forensic Speak was, that might actually be my very first published book, nonfiction, that I wrote to graduate from a forensic science academy. And then friends encouraged me to publish it for us writers, for the industry. But yeah, it's a coffee table book, a light coffee table book.
She's kidding you. Let's switch gears and talk about both of you as readers, because if you're a writer, you really have to be a reader. And what was your journey as a reader like? We'll start with you, Jennifer, because I believe Nancy Drew plays a role.
Oh, yes, I did read all those things. I mean, I'm grateful because I was encouraged to read from a wee child. My parents always had books in the house. We always were going to the library or getting books for our birthdays, gifts. We read a lot. And I read across a lot of genres, actually. And then I was a literature major in college, so I read all the classics and British lit and all that sort of thing. And now I end up reading a lot of nonfiction research. And obviously people in my genre, because there's just an amazing group. This is an amazing genre, and there are amazing writers. So,
Well,
I was the oldest of 4 kids, and I understand now that my parents were just overwhelmed, and so they were like, "You just have to go to bed at night. Like, you can just be awake in your room if you want, but just go to bed." So I was in bed at like 8:30 at night. And the only thing to do was read. Nobody had phones back then, so I read a lot of just everything that was on my parents' bookshelf. Everything from Little House on the Prairie to like editing handbooks, Strunk and White, and that's how I got started in editing. So I was like, oh, it's really interesting about those comma splices. But yeah, that was an early sign. But then I found like Dean Koontz, and then I couldn't go to sleep because I was so afraid of what I had read, and just was so fascinated by the thriller and sometimes the horror genres. So I went and staked out the scary corner of my library and checked out everything systematically as I as I could in my, elementary school and middle school. So yeah, I quickly honed in on my favorite genre.
As published authors with a number of books to your credit, does it get easier because now you know what's involved? Or is it more challenging because you have greater expectations about what you should be doing as a writer?
I think the process gets easier because it's like any job, right, that you step into. There's a production and there's a process to it. But the creativity part, I think, is always a wonderful journey and challenge, and because it's a new story every time you step into a new book. And I know that's why I do it, because I like the challenge of that. So
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. The process is easier and more streamlined. Like, I know what to expect more. My incredible editor, Deborah Ledford, is here tonight. She was also an incredible author herself. But I know that as I'm going through like beta reading and developmental, that I just like need to get it to this point where I can give it to Deborah. And it's like, that's in the future. And I'm so excited about that. But the actual process of coming up with ideas and spending time with the characters in my books, I think that has gotten harder. There's more pressure with that. It's part of the reason I had originally said I wasn't going to write anything else related to Ask for Andrea, because it did resonate with so many readers and was very beloved, which I am so grateful for. But I felt a lot of pressure about that when I thought about going back to it. It's like, can I live up to readers' expectations? Can I, I don't want to just write something to write something in that same universe. But, something grabbed me by the collars and said, you got to write this. And I listened, just like I did with the original book. And I'm really glad that I did, but I had to not psych myself out while I wrote it. It was just like, nope, like just stay with this chapter, stay with this scene. And that's kind of what I have to do, because I will psych myself out pretty easily if I don't.
Having been an editor, does it sometimes make it more difficult for you as an author because you want to say, I know how to do this?
When it comes to like comma splices, I do know. But I learned very quickly that you are just too close to your words to be able to developmentally edit well. Like, I need to rely on other people who can see it fresh, who can see it clearly in a way that I just can't. So I think I'm actually really good at taking critical feedback, and I love it and I welcome it. So I kind of knew that if I was going to dish it as an editor, I needed to be able to learn how to take that gracefully. And I think that's a skill that I'm really grateful that I've cultivated. So nope, I never know best when it comes to like digging into the characters. I mean, I do, but I really rely on and trust my editor's feedback when it comes to the developmental part of things.
You can say as much or as little about the next question as you like. What's coming next from you as an author? We'll start with you, Jennifer.
Okay, so what is coming next is book 6.
So rumors of the demise are greatly exaggerated.
Yes, rumors. I'm not sure where that rumor originated, but there will be at least 3 more in this series that I'm contracted for. So I'm in the editing stage of book 6, and that will be this time next year. And and I'm working on another book. It's a standalone, and it's more writer for hire, and it's more memoir. It is about a criminal and who reforms. It's an amazing story, but that one's a little bit like went this way. Like it's true. It's true crime.
Well,
Well, on Tuesday, the standalone prequel to Ask for Andrea will be out. It's called Forget You Saw Her. So that one is launching right into the world. So I'm not working on it anymore, but I am working on a thriller that takes place on a river rafting trip. You could think of it as the River Wild meets Ted Bundy. So it's a very remote location on the Middle Fork of the Salmon River, and I'm really excited to share it with you.
And a couple of your older titles are also getting the special glitz treatment.
It's a good way to describe it. Yes, those sprayed edges I won't ever get over. They're really cool. Run on Red will be coming out with the glitz treatment, and Gray After Dark as well.
My last question before we turn it over to your readers is, how do you engage with readers on social media, or do you?
How do we engage?
Do you have websites? Are you
yes,
on Instagram?
yeah. So I've got them all. Everything. Got everything. Yes. Yeah. This year was I was really blessed because I actually was able to engage a team to help me, because it's an overwhelming task to put that kind of content out while you're trying to be an author. So they've helped me so much focus my brand, I guess, and engage with readers, because a lot, like the forensic aspect, we've done a lot of that sort of thing, and we have a lot more fun things like that planned for the future, serial killers stuff and all that. So yeah, it's been really fun to see that expand. I have a newsletter that I've cultivated for about 12 or 15 years, or curated, I guess, and that's really fun because I will get personal emails back from readers, and I love that. And every now and then I get a really wonderful personal email from a reader who's just writing to say, hey, I read this and I really loved it, and thank you for putting this out in the world. Those to me are the best, and I immediately respond, because that's the kind of engagement I like, the more one-on-one engagement, or like, let's talk through an email kind of engagement. So,
do they find you through your website?
Yes, pretty easy to find. So, yep, can be contacted through website, Instagram, Facebook.
Noelle?
I tend to be pretty active on social media across the board. I've got a lot of incredible people on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook that I interact with a lot. A lot of you feel like you are friends, and I'm sorry if I don't immediately put a face with a name. It feels like a big family reunion at these events sometimes. And that's the coolest feeling, to be able to have that online interaction, come and say hello, and, be at one of these book signings. So my book got such a tailwind from readers who picked it up and gave it a chance and found it. And I love being able to continue to interact and feel like I can, keep that part of myself out there to, engage with you on those platforms as much as I can.
Why don't we go ahead and open it up to questions from the audience? Start back there. Lady in checker shirt. Actually, you're both wearing checkered shirts, so you'll do 1 and 2.
I did. On an airplane like 3 weeks ago.
So you should see all the books she's got in her bag here.
Oh, I love it. Oh my God.
So I'm the reader mostly in the family, but she wanted to read a book, so I was looking for one, it's not print unless you buy it used.
I know.
Audio book person, so it's in audio. I just wondered if there's going to be a reprint, or...
I am wondering this too, my friends. Yes, so 1 and 2 were actually printed with a Crooked Lane, and then the rest of them are with Blackstone. And so, right, and you can help me, because I know they just had a hard time finding the print versions of 1 and 2, and I too can only find them used. They are available in audio, they are available in digital, ebook. We are working on it with them, and I've been working on it with them for a while. So we are...
Publishers are really reluctant to let go of things, even if they don't want to do anything with it. It's like they won't give you the rights, but they don't want you to have it either.
Right. So we're all going to say a prayer that they're going to be a print on demand very soon. Well, yes.
Go ahead.
That's my daily prayer.
When you write, both of you, it's a bit spiritual, isn't it? I mean, because this idea comes from somewhere. Is that true?
Yeah, it is. I grew up really religious. I'm not anymore, but I do feel like there's a lot of that. It feels like a spiritual experience writing these books in a lot of ways, especially because they are based on real people, that it feels like a big responsibility and I feel a connection to them. And I want to do their story, even if it's just a kernel of it, justice. So it does feel like this emotional, almost kind of transcendent experience to be able to connect in that way with someone else's story. So absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. It's very hard to describe because you have an idea when you sit down of what you should be writing that day or what you need to cover. I got to get this many pages or words out and on this topic of the book, and then something happens when you're doing it, and it's very hard to explain. But something happens, and it's not exactly the way you thought it was going to be, and it often ends up much better. So, yeah.
The question?
Just quickly, since 1 and 2 are not available,
Yes.
can you start anywhere?
You can start anywhere. You can read them as standalones.
Okay.
The thing, because each book is a different case, but the thing you want to catch up on is her Dr. Emily's emotional, like, personal journey.
Okay.
She's got kind of a personal thing going.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then
and love triangle.
quickly, how are you doing with getting in libraries? I know that's been a really big issue.
Yeah, it's been a really cool opportunity. So I have some of my books that are exclusive to Amazon, my ebooks, and until a few months ago, you couldn't put your books in libraries without breaking your exclusivity with Amazon for like Kindle Unlimited. So if I wanted to be able to make my books available in Kindle Unlimited, which a lot of thriller readers use and are really, happy to have, then I couldn't put my books in libraries, but that all changed. So I now have them available to libraries, but a lot of libraries still don't know that that's the case because they're not just immediately in libraries. The librarian has to search and add it and choose to do that. So I did put out a call to my readers, like if you want to request this with your library, then they can decide to add it to their catalog if they want to now, finally. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
Other questions? Way in the back? Gentlemen? Yeah.
I'll try and speak up, but you guys touched on this a little earlier, but I'm curious from your very first books to your most recent books, how do you guys think you've matured as authors? Because in everybody's job, we always typically get a little better. So how do you think you've matured as authors?
I think some of it is that I am willing to go places I wasn't in my first books. I felt like I had to keep them a little bit at arm's length and that I didn't want to touch too many things that felt like nerves to me. But it was Jess Lowry who I went to one of her writing retreats and she did an exercise where it's like, think of the most shame you've ever felt in your life. Think of some of these like things we don't really talk to each other about, and then harness that and put it in your book. And I realized like it was such a light bulb moment for me to be like, yes, like these are the emotions that we don't talk about enough in real life that, we all have in common though. We all feel shame sometimes. We all feel some of these like big, deep emotions that are so close and don't come up in a lot of conversations. So I try to put more of that in my books. And it's not always easy because they are kind of big emotions or vulnerable experiences, but I've tried to step out of my comfort zone and do that more and more.
I asked this question for Jennifer before, but this is for Noelle then. When you come up with an idea for a book, do you know how you want it to end? Or do you write and decide, well, I'll end it this way? Because the ending is kind of important because it kind of gets you from the next book.
It is important. And since mine are standalones, like I can, my characters can only go through so much. So mine are usually just one book, then that's all for them. But some of my books I know exactly how it's going to end. And then some of them I have to really sit with it because I do discovery right through the headlights and I'll paint myself into corners sometimes because I kind of want it to feel impossible, and I don't know how they're going to get out of it. I put these two characters in a crawl space for a while, and I just had to set the book aside because I was like, I don't know how you're getting out of there. I'm really sorry. But it helps me to kind of stay with them and write it in a way that feels true to like the hopelessness of those moments. And then I find my way through and sometimes have to go back to the beginning to edit the threads of that together. But
So do you both get writer's block every once in a while? And what do you do if you get that?
I honestly don't, knock on wood, because do I get tired? Do I not want to sit down and write? Yeah, a lot. But writer's block, no, because I think there's just I was given a trick early on. It's like if you start to like paint yourself into a corner or feel like I don't know what to do, just research. And it works really well. Research, take a walk, take a shower. Like, yeah, that's what I do.
yeah, that's a really good advice is the research. Every single time, writing does not come easily to me. I am a slow writer, and every single time I sit down to write, my brain acts like a turtle on its back and is like, you're all out of words. Like, what are you going to do now? And I just have to call BS on it and just sit down at the keyboard and write. And sometimes the words are not what I want them to be at first, but I just need to keep doing it. And I've found that they just will come. That's my faith, is that the words will come and I will not run out of them.
Okay, another question.
Full time, so it helps.
All of these books have been in your series, Jen, from start to finish. I have read and can't wait for the next book to come out. Is there any chance that there's a TV? I mean, could this ever become a TV series, or are we allowed to
Talk about it? Are you allowed to talk about it? Bring it up. There is a chance, and I am working on it. So, yeah, the first 5 books. Through this have been purchased, and I am working with the producers to write the first season. And I always say this is a slow-moving train. Like, it's really slow. Like, you can run faster than this train. You can run circles around this train. But it is moving, and so fingers crossed, we'll just keep going and hope. And, yeah, we'll see. So.
Other questions? Beck?
I'm thinking being out there writing something almost puts you in a vulnerable position. Like, do you get some negative feedback or creepy emails and stuff?
Thanks. No, it's a good question. It's an interesting question. There are no other Noelle Ilhis out there. If you Google me, I'm the only one. So that is a little bit of pressure. And it is kind of a strange experience to be a little more out there in the world. It's cool, but yes, I have gotten a few. I'm not going to mention them since this is being recorded. I don't want those people to be mad, even though they were creepy and I'm mad. But it's yes, generally most of the interactions, especially online, are just lovely. People are very kind. People are respectful. So the wide majority are not creepy, but it's the 1% that'll sometimes be real loud and creepy.
I'm not as wildly well known as Noelle yet, but I've had one or two kind of creepy personal, like not online, but personal things because of a different book outside of this series that I wrote, a standalone thriller that was based on a true crime. And then somebody who had been involved in that world reached out a little too much. So, yeah. Involved some light police contact, but it's fine. It's fine. It's all fodder for writing.
Other questions? Jen, before we conclude, what number are we up to? 52. Noelle's publisher sent 2 very special giveaways, so if you can pick 2 numbers between 1 and 52.
Okay, I am going to pick 24.
It's 24 here. Look at your tickets.
All
Okay,
right,
come up here.
congrats. And the other number is 10.
And 10.
That happened at the last one, too. They're right next to each other.
They're some very nice, I guess they're coffee mugs.
They're coffee mugs. This is the coffee shop that's in the book.
And I do have to warn the owners that they are not machine washable, hand wash only.
I
or
didn't
they'll
know that. That's
disintegrate.
good to know.
Apparently they're environmentally friendly material.
Oh, so they might melt in the dishwasher. Like those corn straws.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and we'll say goodbye to our virtual audience, and we'll thank Noelle and Jennifer for being here.
Thank you.
And at this point, we're going to get them ready to sign. If as you stand up, you can fold up your chairs, put them over on the cookbook side. We'll get them out of your way. You should have numbered tickets. We'll do the signing by number. Thank you.